My lawyer wrote to me. Call me immediately. He told me the horrifying truth about my mother, who stole my inheritance for herself, but now justice will make her crawl and beg at my feet in disgrace. Okay, so where do I even begin? I guess with Chapanero. The smells of arepas frying in the morning, mingling with the exhaust fumes from the buses, groaning up Calle 65. The constant, rhythmic thump of salsa music drifting from open doorways, a soundtrack to my childhood. We lived in a second-floor apartment on a street that never slept. I can still feel the rough texture of the balcony railing under my small hands, the cool, painted metal a welcome relief from the Bogotá sun beating down on my face. Below, the street vendors hawked their wares, mangoes, empanadas, pirated DVDs, their voices a chaotic symphony that somehow blended into a comforting hum. Our apartment wasn't bad, not really. 2 bedrooms, a small living room crammed with furniture. Teresa insisted on keeping, quote, for best, and that tiny balcony overlooking the chaos. The walls were painted a sickly yellow, a color I now associate with a perpetual feeling of unease. My mother Teresa was a force of nature, elegant, impeccably dressed, her hair always perfectly coiffed. She moved through our small apartment like a queen surveying her domain. I remember the scent of her perfume, something floral and sharp, almost overpowering. We were close, or so I believed. She'd smother me with kisses, call me M.I. Princesa, and tell me I was the most important thing in her world, but her affection always felt conditional. Tied to my obedience, my adherence to her meticulously crafted image of our family. Everything had to be just so. My school uniform always ironed, my shoes polished, my hair neatly braided. Mia, she'd say, her voice a low, insistent murmur. Appearances are everything. People judge, they whisper. We have to maintain a certain image. She'd clutch my hand a little too tightly as we walked down the street, her eyes scanning the faces of passers-by, as if searching for a flicker of disapproval. And woven into this obsession with appearances, always, was money. We weren't rich, not by any stretch. My father had left when I was a baby, a shadowy figure I only knew from a faded photograph on Teresa's nightstand. She worked as a secretary for some government agency, a job she complained about incessantly, yet clung to with a fierce determination. It wasn't enough to be truly wealthy, but it was enough for her to obsess over. Every peso was accounted for, meticulously logged in a small leather-bound notebook she kept locked in her dresser drawer. Even my meager allowance, earned by helping Señora Rodriguez, our elderly neighbor, with her groceries, was carefully monitored. It's important to learn the value of a peso, mija, she'd say, her fingers fluttering over the coins as she counted them out. Money is security, it's respect, it's everything. My grandmother, Mama Elena, was a stark contrast. She lived in a small, brightly painted house on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by a riot of bougainvillea and hibiscus. The air there was thick, with the scent of earth and wood smoke, a welcome change from the exhaust fumes of Chapanero. Mama Elena was warmth personified. Her hands, rough from years of gardening, were always ready with a hug or a pat on the head. She'd bake arepas for me, her face creased with a smile as she watched me devour them, and tell me stories about our family history, her voice a soothing melody in the warm afternoon sun. She'd slip me a few pesos, folded into my palm, her eyes twinkling. For a treat, mi amor, she'd whisper. Don't tell your mother. It wasn't the money itself, it was the gesture, the secret shared between us, that made it precious. Mama Elena was my safe haven, my escape from Teresa's carefully constructed world of appearances and anxieties. Looking back, I see the subtle ways Teresa tried to minimize Mama Elena's influence. Your grandmother is too indulgent, she'd say, her voice laced with disapproval. She spoils you. She doesn't understand the real world. There was a tension between them, a simmering resentment that I couldn't quite understand then. I just knew that with Mama Elena I could breathe. I could be myself, messy and imperfect. With Teresa, it was always a performance, a constant striving to meet her impossible standards. Always walking on eggshell, wondering what tiny infraction might shatter the fragile illusion of our perfect lives. And the saddest part? I never questioned it. I thought it was normal. I thought all mothers were like that. God, was I wrong. It wasn't a sudden takeover, more like a slow, creeping vine, tightening its grip around every aspect of my life. Money, especially, became Teresa's weapon of choice. Even after I started working, a junior designer at a small advertising agency, she insisted on managing my finances. "You're too young to understand these things, mija," she'd say, her smile tight. "Let me handle it. It's for your own good." I'd hand over my paycheck every month, and she'd dole out a small allowance, just enough for lunch and the occasional movie ticket. The rest, she claimed, went into a savings account for my future. I never saw any statements, never questioned her methods. I trusted her, blindly, stupidly. Now, the nausea rises in my throat every time I think about that misplaced trust. I remember once, I wanted to buy a new laptop. Mine was ancient, the keys sticking, the screen flickering. It was essential for my work, but when I broached the subject with Teresa, her face hardened. "A new laptop? What's wrong with the one you have?" "Perfectly good. Waste of money." The argument that followed still burns in my memory. Me, pleading my case, explaining how crucial it was for my job. Her, dismissing my concerns with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. "You're being dramatic, Mija. Learn to appreciate what you have." I ended up borrowing a clunky old machine from a colleague, the shame burning hot on my cheeks every time I had to use it. Her obsession with appearances only intensified as I got older. Dinner parties became more frequent, the guests more affluent. The apartment, once simply cluttered, was now meticulously staged, every object placed just so. New furniture appeared, expensive pieces that seemed out of place in our small space. I remember asking her where the money was coming from. "A bonus at work," she'd say vaguely, her eyes darting away. "Don't worry your pretty little head about it." But I did worry. A nagging unease settled in my gut, a feeling that something wasn't right. Then Mama Elena passed. It was sudden, a heart attack. I was devastated. She was my anchor, the only person who truly saw me. The grief was a physical ache, a crushing weight on my chest. But even in my sorrow, I noticed Teresa's reaction. Yes, there were tears, but there was also something else. A strange, almost calculating glint in her eyes. She immediately took charge of everything. The funeral arrangements, the handling of Mama Elena's estate. I was too numb to protest, too lost in my grief to question her actions. "Don't worry, mija," she'd say, patting my hand. "I'll take care of everything." And I foolishly let her. I let her take control, just like I always had. I handed over the reins of my life, my inheritance, my future, without a second thought. God, how I wish I could go back. How I wish I had seen the warning signs, the red flags waving frantically in the wind. But I was blinded by grief, by trust, by years of conditioning. I was trapped in the web she had so carefully woven, and I didn't even know it. Now I'm left picking up the pieces, trying to understand how the woman who called me Mi Princesa could have betrayed me so completely. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because Tuesdays were always the worst. Endless meetings, demanding clients, the constant pressure to perform. I was drowning in deadlines, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the gnawing anxiety that I was always one step behind. My phone rang, interrupting a particularly brutal critique of my latest design. It was my lawyer, a man I barely knew. My grandmother had insisted I have a lawyer of my own, separate from the family lawyer Teresa always used. "Just in case," she'd said, her eyes holding a depth of meaning I hadn't understood then. He'd handled the minimal paperwork after Mama Lina's passing, a few simple forms I'd signed without really understanding what they meant. I hadn't heard from him since. Señorita, protagonist's last name, he said, his voice tight with urgency. I need you to come to my office immediately. It's important. His tone sent a shiver down my spine. Is everything okay? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. There was a pause, a heavy silence that stretched on, forever. It's about your grandmother's will, he finally said. There's been a discrepancy. Discrepancy. Such a clinical, detached word for what was about to unravel my world. I remember the taxi ride to his office, the city blurring into a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the rising tide of nausea. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen, something that would change everything. His office was small, dimly lit, crammed with dusty books and overflowing file cabinets. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and old paper. He gestured for me to sit, his face grim. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. He pulled a thick file from a cabinet, the paper yellowed with age. This is your grandmother's will, he said, his voice flat. The original. He pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. This is where she bequeaths her entire estate to you. Her house, her savings, everything. My breath hitched. I knew Mama Elena had intended to leave me something, but I never imagined it would be everything. A wave of guilt washed over me. I should have been there for her more. I should have. He cleared his throat, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. This, he said, placing another document beside the first, is the will your mother submitted to probate. My stomach lurched. This document was different, subtly, almost imperceptibly different, but different nonetheless. This version, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, leaves everything to your mother. It's a forgery. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Forgery. My mother. The two concepts clashed in my mind, refusing to reconcile. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me, leaving me suspended in a dizzying void. He explained the details, the painstakingly crafted forgery, the forged signatures, the falsified dates. He showed me copies of bank statements, showing large sums of money being transferred from Mama Elena's accounts to Teresa's, transactions that occurred shortly after her death. The evidence was irrefutable, a damning indictment of the woman who had raised me, the woman I had trusted implicitly. The room spun, the dusty books blurring into indistinguishable shapes. I felt a strange detachment, as if I was watching this scene unfold from a distance, as if it wasn't really happening to me. I don't understand, I stammered, my voice cracking. Why? Why would she do this? He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and something else I couldn't quite place. I don't know, he said softly. But we're going to find out. And in that moment, the numbness shattered, replaced by a raw, searing rage. A rage so intense it felt like it would consume me. Tears streamed down my face, hot and bitter. I wanted to scream, to break something, to lash out at the injustice of it all. But all I could do was sit there, in that dimly lit office, the weight of my mother's betrayal crushing me. I don't know how long I sat there, just numb, staring at those documents, the stark black ink, a testament to my mother's betrayal. It felt like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that knocked the air out of my lungs. My lawyer kept talking, explaining legal options, outlining next steps, but his words were just a muffled drone, a distant hum against the roaring in my ears. All I could think about was her. Teresa. My Teresa. How could she? How could the woman who tucked me into bed, who bandaged my scraped knees, who called me, "Am I Princessa?" do something so monstrous? The numbness eventually gave way to a white-hot rage. I wanted to confront her, to scream in her face, to demand answers. I wanted to see the look in her eyes, the flicker of guilt, the shame. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling so violently I could barely dial. It went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. I slammed my phone down on the lawyer's desk, the force of the impact startling us both. I want to sue her, I choked out, the words raw and ragged. I want her to pay for what she's done. My lawyer, bless his soul, remained calm, his voice a steady anchor in the storm raging inside me. He explained the process, the complexities of a fraud case, the time it would take. He warned me it wouldn't be easy, that it would be messy, that it would likely tear my family apart. But I didn't care. In that moment, all I wanted was justice. I wanted to see Teresa brought to her knees, stripped of her carefully constructed facade, exposed for the liar and thief she was. I left his office in a daze, the city lights blurring through a film of tears. The familiar streets of Chapinero felt alien, hostile. I walked for hours, my mind a chaotic jumble of memories, accusations, and self-recrimination. How could I have been so blind, so naive? How could I have missed the signs, the subtle manipulations, the carefully crafted lies? The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I went back to my apartment, the sickly yellow walls now mocking me, a reminder of the gilded cage I'd lived in for so long. Everything looked different, tainted by the knowledge of my mother's deceit. The expensive furniture, the meticulously arranged knickknacks, the perfectly ironed tablecloth, all of it felt like a lie. I went into my bedroom, the small, sparsely furnished space that had always been my sanctuary. I curled up on the bed, the thin blanket offering no comfort, and sobbed. I sobbed for the lost inheritance, for the shattered trust, for the mother I thought I knew, for the naive, foolish girl I had been. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mama Elena's face, her kind eyes filled with a sadness I hadn't understood then. Now I understood. She had seen the darkness in Teresa, the grasping, insatiable hunger that lurked beneath the polished veneer. She had tried to protect me, in her own way, but I hadn't listened. I had been too caught up in Teresa's web of lies to see the truth, and now the truth was a bitter pill to swallow. A truth that tasted of betrayal, of regret, of a profound and aching loss. The news spread like wildfire. I hadn't told anyone yet, aside from my lawyer, but Teresa must have sensed something. Maybe she saw the shift in my eyes, the hardened resolve, the flicker of anger that I couldn't quite conceal. Or maybe guilt got the better of her, that gnawing fear of exposure driving her to confess, in her own twisted way. Whatever the reason, the whispers started. First, within the immediate family, then rippling outwards, spreading through the extended network of aunts, uncles, and cousins like a contagious disease. My phone started ringing incessantly. Aunts I hadn't spoken to in years, cousins I barely knew, all clamoring for details, their voices a mix of shock, disbelief, and morbid curiosity. "Is it true?" they'd ask, their voices hushed. "Did Teresa really?" The unspoken accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't bring myself to repeat the story, to relive the gut-wrenching betrayal each time. "Talk to my lawyer?" I'd say, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "He'll tell you everything." Then came the pressure. Oh God, the pressure. It started subtly, with veiled suggestions that I was overreacting, that it was all a misunderstanding, that I should just let it go for the sake of the family. "Think of your mother, Mija," my Aunt Sophia pleaded, her voice thick with tears. "She's still your mother. This will kill her." Kill her? What about me? What about the slow, agonizing death of my trust, of my faith in the woman who was supposed to love and protect me? The pressure escalated. Family gatherings became battlegrounds, the air thick with tension and unspoken accusations. I was ostracized, labeled the troublemaker, the one who was tearing the family apart. "Why can't you just forgive her?" my Uncle Miguel demanded, his voice booming across the room. "It's family. Family is everything. Everything, except the truth, apparently. Except justice. Except me." My cousins, who had once been my allies, my confidants, now avoided my gaze, their faces a mixture of pity and disapproval. I felt like a pariah, an outcast in my own family. The isolation was crushing. a heavy weight on my chest. I started questioning myself. Was I doing the right thing? Was I being too harsh? Was the pursuit of justice worth the fracturing of my family? The doubt gnawed at me, a persistent, insidious voice whispering in the back of my mind. But then, something unexpected happened. A few of my more distant relatives, people I barely knew, started reaching out. They had heard the whispers, the rumors of Teresa's deceit. And then, one by one, they started sharing their own stories. Stories of loans that were never repaid, of NTS that mysteriously vanished, of inheritances that were redirected. A pattern emerged, a chilling tapestry of manipulation and deceit, woven over years, spanning generations. Teresa, it turned out, wasn't a one-time offender. She was a seasoned con artist, a master manipulator who had preyed on her own family for years. My Aunt Isabel, a woman I had always admired for her quiet strength, confessed that Teresa had managed her finances for years, promising lucrative returns that never materialized. I trusted her, she said, her voice trembling with anger and shame. She was my sister. I thought she had my best interests at heart. My cousin David, a struggling artist, revealed that Teresa had convinced him to invest his meager savings in a, quote, sure thing, that turned out to be a complete scam. I lost everything, he said, his eyes filled with a bitter resignation. I had to start from scratch. I was so angry, so humiliated. Hearing their stories, seeing their pain, solidified my resolve. I wasn't alone. I wasn't crazy. Teresa hadn't just betrayed me, she had betrayed them all. And in that shared pain, in that collective outrage, I found a new kind of strength. A strength born of solidarity, of shared experience, of the unwavering pursuit of justice. These relatives, initially skeptical, now rallied around me, their support a much-needed lifeline in the turbulent waters of family betrayal. They understood. They knew the insidious nature of her manipulation, the devastating impact of her lies. And they were ready to fight. Together. We became a united front, a small but determined army, fighting for what was rightfully ours. We shared information, compared notes, and supported each other through the grueling legal process. The pressure from the rest of the family intensified, the accusations becoming more pointed, more venomous. But now, I wasn't alone. I had allies. I had people who believed me, who understood the depth of Teresa's betrayal. And that, more than anything, gave me the strength to keep fighting, to keep pushing for the truth, no matter the cost. Because now, it wasn't just about me anymore, it was about all of us. It was about exposing the truth, holding Teresa accountable, and finally breaking free from the web of lies she had so carefully spun. And in that fight, in that shared pursuit of justice, I found a strange, unexpected sense of peace. The lawyer's words echoed in my head. We have a strong case. She won't get away with this. But the hollow ache in my chest had nothing to do with legal strategy and everything to do with the gaping hole where my mother used to be. I stared out the window of my apartment, the chaotic energy of Chapanero below feeling strangely distant, muffled like I was watching it through a thick pane of glass. Rain lashed against the window pane, mirroring the storm raging inside me. Was I wrong? I kept replaying the memories, searching for a crack in the narrative, a glimmer of the mother I thought I knew, the bedtime stories, the Sunday lunches, the way she'd fuss over me when I was sick. Were those all lies, too? Had she been acting all along? The thought twisted in my gut, a sickening blend of nausea and grief. I hugged myself, trying to ward off the chill that seeped into my bones, a coldness that had nothing to do with the Bogota rain, and everything to do with the icy realization that the woman who had raised me, the woman I had loved and trusted, was a stranger. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Exhaustion gnawed at the edges of my sanity, but every time I closed my eyes, the memories flooded back. Mama Elena's gentle smile, the way she'd squeeze my hand, the secret smiles we'd share over stolen treats. And then Teresa's face, contorted in anger, her voice sharp with accusations. The constant criticisms, the subtle manipulations, the relentless pressure to conform. I tossed and turned, tangled in the sheets, the ghosts of the past haunting my every waking moment. The legal battle was a slow, agonizing grind. Depositions, interrogatories, endless paperwork. Every document, every email, every phone call was a fresh reminder of the betrayal. My lawyer was a rock, a steady presence in the swirling chaos, but even his reassurances couldn't quell the rising tide of doubt. What if I lost? What if, despite all the evidence, Teresa managed to slither her way out of it? The thought terrified me, a chilling premonition of a future where she would emerge victorious, her lies validated, her deceit rewarded. And then there was the family. The whispers had escalated to outright accusations. Phone calls became shouting matches. Family gatherings turned into icy standoffs. My Aunt Sophia, once my fiercest defender, now treated me with a cautious distance, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and reproach. "You're destroying our family," she'd whisper, her voice laced with accusation. "Can't you just let it go?" Let it go? How could I let it go? How could I erase the betrayal, the lies, the years of manipulation? How could I pretend that none of it had ever happened? I started isolating myself, withdrawing from the few friends I had, the constant barrage of questions and judgments too much to bear. Even the support from my newfound allies felt tainted. Their shared experiences, their own stories of betrayal, while validating, also served as a constant reminder of the pervasive darkness that had infected our family. We were united in our pain, but that unity came at a steep price. The price of shattered trust, of fractured relationships, of a family torn apart by lies and deceit. One particularly bleak afternoon, I found myself standing in front of Mama Elena's old house. The brightly painted walls were faded now, the bougainvillea overgrown and untamed. The air, once thick with the scent of earth and wood smoke, now smelled of neglect and decay. I sat on the crumbling steps, the rough concrete cold against my skin, and wept. I wept for Mama Elena, for the stolen moments, for the future we would never have. I wept for myself, for the lost innocence, for the shattered trust, for the gaping hole in my heart where my mother used to be. Was I wrong to pursue justice? Was I wrong to prioritize the truth over the fragile illusion of family harmony? Was I wrong to fight for what was rightfully mine, even if it meant tearing my family apart? The questions swirled around me, a relentless chorus of doubt and self-recrimination. I closed my eyes, wishing I could go back, wishing I could undo the past, wishing I could have the mother I thought I had, the family I thought we were. But wishes, like memories, are fickle things. They offer fleeting glimpses of what could have been, only to vanish into the ether, leaving behind the bitter taste of regret and the crushing weight of what is. And what is a broken family, a stolen inheritance, and a daughter grappling with the devastating realization that the woman who brought her into this world was the one who shattered it. The courtroom was cold, sterile, the air thick with a tension that crackled like static. I sat beside my lawyer, his hand resting reassuringly on my arm, but the warmth didn't reach the icy knot in my stomach. Across the aisle, Teresa sat ramrod straight, her face a mask of composure, but her eyes, those dark, haunted eyes, betrayed her. I saw the fear lurking beneath the carefully applied makeup, the flicker of panic that she couldn't quite conceal. The trial had been a blur, a whirlwind of testimonies, evidence, and legal jargon. I testified, recounting the years of manipulation, the stolen inheritance, the crushing betrayal. It had been excruciating, reliving every painful detail under the harsh glare of the courtroom lights. But I had done it. I had spoken my truth, no matter how difficult, no matter how painful. And now, it was almost over. The closing arguments had been made, the jury had deliberated, and the verdict was about to be read. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall, each tick an agonizing reminder of the impending judgment. We, the jury, find the defendant, Teresa, protagonist's last name, guilty on all counts. The words echoed through the silent courtroom, each syllable a hammer blow against the fragile remnants of my family. Teresa's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled. The composure she had maintained throughout the trial evaporated, replaced by a raw, unfiltered display of anguish. Her shoulders slumped, her face crumpled, and a low, keening wail escaped her lips. She turned to me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and pleading. "Maija," she whispered, her voice hoarse with unshed tears. "Please, you don't understand. I did it for you, for us." The words, so familiar, so ingrained in the fabric of my childhood, now felt hollow, meaningless. Lies, all lies. I looked at her, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. I wanted to feel something, anything, anger, pity, even a flicker of the love I had once felt for her. But there was nothing, just a vast, empty void where my mother used to be. The judge read the sentence, detailing the financial penalties, the loss of the properties, the public exposure of her deceit. Teresa's sobs echoed through the courtroom, a soundtrack to the final act of her carefully orchestrated downfall. I watched as the bailiffs led her away, her head bowed in shame, her hands cuffed behind her back. And in that moment I felt nothing. No sense of triumph, no sense of vindication, just a profound, aching emptiness. Justice had been served, but at what cost? The families fractured, beyond repair. The whispers have turned into shouts, the accusations into open warfare. Some relatives sided with me, their support a much-needed lifeline in the turbulent aftermath. Others, blinded by loyalty or denial, continued to defend Teresa, blaming me for the family's implosion. Family gatherings are now strained, awkward affairs, the air thick with unspoken resentments and simmering anger. The easy camaraderie we once shared is gone, replaced by a fragile, uneasy truce. I won. I got my inheritance back, the house, the money, everything that was rightfully mine. But it feels like a Pyrrhic victory. The money can't buy back the lost trust, the shattered relationships, the years of stolen innocence. The house, once a symbol of family and belonging, now stands as a stark reminder of the betrayal that tore us apart. I live in Mama Elena's house now, surrounded by the ghosts of happier times. The bougainvillea still blooms, a riot of color against the faded paint, but the vibrant hues can't mask the underlying sense of loss. I try to find solace in the familiar surroundings, in the memories of Mama Elena's warmth and laughter, but the echoes of Teresa's lies still linger, a constant reminder of the fractured foundation upon which my life was built. I'm rebuilding my life, piece by painful piece. I have a new job, new friends, a new sense of independence. But the scars remain, hidden beneath the surface, a constant reminder of the betrayal that shaped me. I'm stronger now, more resilient, but also wary. Trust, once freely given, is now a precious commodity, carefully guarded, cautiously dispensed. So Reddit, I ask you, AITA? Was I wrong to pursue justice against my own mother, even though it caused this huge family rift? Was I wrong to prioritize the truth and my inheritance over family harmony, even after she betrayed me so deeply? I don't know anymore. I'm lost, confused, and desperately seeking an outside perspective. Tell me, internet strangers, was I wrong?